Ini diharapkan bisa banyak membantu teman-teman nantinya untuk penulisan dan juga teknik untuk publikasi itu sendiri, baik di artikel dalam bahasa Indonesia maupun dalam bahasa Inggris. Lalu kemudian saya mau sharing sedikit laporan mengenai kegiatan ini sendiri. Jadi kita menerima sekitar 35 artikel yang masuk, termasuk pendaftaran, dan teman-teman termasuk di antara 24 yang terpilih. Satu peserta ternyata tidak bisa datang kalau dari Aceh, berhalangan, tapi tetap akan join via online. Terus kemudian satu peserta juga tidak bisa datang kalau ternyata ada ujian akhir. Terus kemudian topik peserta sendiri itu beragam, mulai dari populasi, perilaku, habitat, ekologi, sampai di konservasi dengan beragam jenis primata, tapi yang paling mayoritas adalah orangutan. Terus kemudian harapannya kegiatan ini bisa meningkatkan kapasitas teman-teman, juga yang paling utama menjadi sarana untuk berjejaring satu sama lain, karena saya yakin nggak semua kenal satu sama lain di sini gitu ya. Oke, terus sedikit housekeeping notes untuk kegiatan hari ini. Di belakang teman-teman itu ada galerisi ulang, kemudian juga ada snack, silahkan diambil sesuai dengan kebutuhan, sesuai dengan kemampuan. Terus kemudian WC ada di tangga di sebelah kiri paling ujung, musola bisa lewat sini. Itu sedikit mengenai acara. Terus kemudian kegiatan hari ini akan lebih banyak dilangsungkan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Beberapa speaker juga akan melakukan dalam bahasa Inggris. Susan akan melakukan presentasi pertama dan dilanjutkan dengan Zimbo di pembicara kedua. Lalu lanjut Huda yang kita harapkan bisa hadir offline juga pada hari ini. Lalu saya meminta kesediaan teman-teman untuk diizinkan untuk merecord, untuk ditampilkan di YouTube live channel. Kalau ada keberatan tolong bilang aja. Oke, terima kasih. Oke, kita langsung mulai aja ya untuk pembicara hari ini. Yang pertama kita punya Dr. Susan Chin. Susan, I will read a bit about your biography. So, Susan is the co-director of the Borneo Nature Foundation, and she is also the teaching fellow on the MSc in Primate Conservation and in Biological Anthropology, Oxford Brookes University in UK. And she's leading a long-term study of Bornean gibbons and initiated the first long-term detailed study focused on the Sunda clothed leopard. She's also the vice chair of the IUCN Private Specialist Group section on small apes. So it's so nice to having you here finally, Susan. And yeah, without any further ado, so the time is yours.
Are we recording? Oh, okay. Hello. Selamat siang semua. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you to UMass, Happy, Chiara, IU especially for organizing this. This is the first time I have done this. It is something I have thought about with many other people for a long time. What are the barriers to publication? Because it is more than just the fact that most publications of scientific publications are in English. And thank you to everyone who completed the questionnaire about some of the challenges, and thank you for submitting your manuscripts. I'm so happy to be back in Indonesia. It is 2.5 years since I have been here. I first came to Indonesia in 2002, and while I do go back to UK, I always come back to my second home. So I will get started. I hope if this is successful, if you think this is a good idea, this is something we can do in other countries in Southeast Asia. So your feedback is really important. What do you like, what do you not like, and what worked? And first, most important, I am not an expert. I have had papers rejected, I have data I have not yet published, I have had people give me bad reviews, but we do have expert speakers later from, next, please. We have expert speakers from a national Indonesian journal, a regional journal, and an international journal. who can give you, all editors. So I'm going to give you a lot of my personal experience in this, but yes, I'm not the expert. So next please. Sometimes writing papers, my parents always used to ask when I get published, do I get paid for publishing? No. But it is something important to do, both in academia and to share our knowledge, share our experience. But it takes time to collect the data, to write the paper, to go through different rounds of reviews, corrections, proofreading, formatting. This can take months. But also, especially if it's in English, who's going to read it? Will the government of Indonesia read it? Perhaps not. Will the local communities read it? The general public, even English-speaking general public, do not read scientific papers. So we have to make it interesting. Next, please. Can your collaborators access it? Of course, publishing, sometimes it's behind a paywall. If your university does not subscribe to the journal, you have to pay to maybe access the papers. Publishing open access is great, but it can be expensive. And yes, will everyone you work with understand what you have written? Next, please. Interestingly, importantly, I think some journals are now asking authors to provide social media, interesting information from the paper so that the general public can understand what you have written. And it's important, but it's a little bit of extra work, so you have to write your scientific paper, then your tweet or Instagram post, and provide photographs, so it's important, but it is more work. Next, please. Publishing can be emotional. Sometimes you will not get a good review. Now this is wrong. Reviewers should always be fair, but not overly critical. Hopefully your co-authors will help. Sometimes they are not helpful. Criticism, it can be, sometimes you take it personally. I certainly do when you get a bad review. But if you don't like the reviews from the journal, you don't have to submit to that journal. Take the paper back and send it somewhere with nice reviewers. And everyone, at every stage of their career, will have had a paper rejected. Even the most senior primatologists in Indonesia, in the world, will have had a paper rejected. You're not alone. Next, please. So this is just some information from the survey that IU did, and again, understanding where people are coming from who want to publish. It's not only at universities or students, also NGOs, government want to publish information from, for example, surveys they do in national parks. Next, please. Yes, so government agency, they are also doing work, and it can be very challenging if you're not in a university system to understand how to publish. And for the very first time you write a paper, it's very confusing. How do I choose my journal? Where do I submit? Next, please. So, yes, how do you choose a journal? The structure of scientific writing, anxiety and emotion, no guidelines on mentoring, and the burden of using English, again, all responses to the questionnaire. So again, it's not English, of course, publishing in English is part of the problem, it's not the only problem or barrier. Next, please. Types of software, again, ethics of scientific writing. How do you communicate with the editors and reviewers? Structure, sending the paper. Very good questions. Next, please. So how do you choose your journal? So as I said, we have editors that will join us online and offline, national, regional and international editors. What about the impact factor of the journal? Now that is a number that is supposed to tell you roughly how many people will read the article. But even if the impact factor is low, sometimes the conservation value of the journal can be high. So it's not the only number to choose when choosing a journal. If you want to publish open access, that's great. I'll talk about this in a minute, but it is expensive. If you're not sure about the journal, most journals will publish their aims and scope. That can sometimes be a little bit confusing. So if you're not sure, look at the latest issue of the journal. What other papers have they published? And are these similar to yours? Also, you will have read other people's papers when you're preparing your own. Where did they publish? Maybe you could choose a journal that way. And also think outside the box. Primate journals that are specific to primates are not the only journals that will publish papers about primates. Next, please. So this is an example. Oryx is not a primate-only paper. It's a conservation journal. And I know this is a bit of text, but this is copied from their website. And so this is about open access. So they have a partnership with the IUCN Species Survival Commission, of which the Primate Specialist Group and the section on small apes is part. And members of these specialist groups can publish for free. You just have to contact Oryx about this. Next, please. So again, I'm happy to make this presentation available in the Google Drive, and I know again a lot of text, but these are the aims and scope of Oryx. So, nature and results of conservation initiatives, research on the sustainable use of wild species, research on the status of threatened species or groups or habitat, reviews of conservation policy, planning for species and biodiversity conservation, the working of international conservation conventions, history of conservation, including how people and organisation initiatives work, causes and consequences of biodiversity loss, case studies of conservation projects and programs, and the social, economic and political dimensions of conservation. So Oryx has a very broad interest in publishing conservation article. And again, if this all sounds a bit confusing and you're not sure, have a look at what has previously been published in Oryx or any other journal. Next, please. Oryx is, I think now mostly open access, or if not completely. Most journals, if you look, will give you the option to apply, if they do open access, to apply for a fee waiver. And it will be up to the journal to decide if they give it to you, but it's worth asking if it's possible to publish open access, but for them to not require you to pay for it. Not every journal publishes or has the option to do open access, but this is just an example. And again, the information is on the journal websites, just sometimes not easy to find. Next, please. So how do you choose your co-authors? Most of us working in primatology cannot do the work alone. We will always need people to help us, and so we need co-authors. So for example, supervisor, lecturer, advisor, boss. The research assistants who helped you in the field, maybe some students, if you have any foreign collaborators, perhaps government officials. You don't have to include all of these are just examples of who you might want to include, but remember that what should happen with co-authors, if they're a co-author, they should help. They should help write the paper, they should provide feedback, they should not be added just for the name. Next, please. So yes, will everyone really contribute? And actually now some journals will ask you when you submit to state what every person named on the paper actually did, because they don't want people added who have not contributed. So yeah, some journals ask you to purely state what every author on the paper did or contributed to the paper. Next, please. So referencing software was a question that came up. Now, EndNote is possibly the best known, but it's not free. So I use Mendeley, which is free, is also Zotero. They seem to be interchangeable. If you use one and then change to another one, you can export your reference library and import it to a different software. All journals require you to reference differently. I don't know why. But Mendeley, I've found, has the formatting guidelines for pretty much every journal that I have used. Next, please. So, there should have been a picture of all the authors here, but it didn't work. Just as an example of a book about Gibbons, at the International Primatological Society in Nairobi, which was, 2018, we had a symposium about Gibbons. And there were 20 presentations, no, 18, and we decided to do a book. And it's being published by Cambridge University Press. It will be published this year, 2022. And obviously this was in Nairobi, in Kenya. People who study Gibbons are not working in Africa. So I thought it would be interesting now to look at where did everyone come from. So happily, of the 18 chapters, we have 9, these are just the first authors. Of course, all the chapters have many authors, but the first authors, 9 are from Gibbon habitat countries and 9 are not. Of the first authors, 7 are women and 11 are men. I thought this actually looked quite good, but, and this comes down to access. The next slide I was less happy with when I looked at the numbers. Next, please. So, men from Gibbon habitat countries of first authors, 8. Men not from Gibbon habitat countries, 3. Women not from Gibbon habitat countries, 6. Women from a Gibbon habitat country, 1. Now, I helped put this book together, and I'm not happy with myself. I think, and I'm sure Professor Joe Setchell will speak about this tomorrow. We need to do better in terms of the access to being able to publish this information. So, this book's nearly finished. My next book, I will do better. And maybe some people in this room will be first authors on that. So this, I think, is just an example of how important it is to open publishing accessibility as much as possible, which is the reason that we wanted to do this workshop. Next, please. So some of the issues, now this comes from some of this comes from a workshop that was done by the British Ecological Society, looking at what might be some of the problems. Well, unequal funding sources, an imbalance in trading opportunities, facilities and resources, limited access to research. It's difficult for you to do a literature review if all the papers you need to access you have to pay for. I think part of the problem is people don't want to speak out about the fact that there are quite serious problems in scientific publishing, not just in conservation and primatology. And yes, the expectation that the papers have to be in English. And this perhaps leads to a lack of visibility of research not published in English. Perhaps a prioritization of Western scientific research over that, over local expertise. And I think also a fear of reaching out for help. Most people will want to help. We've all been there and needed help in the past. I also appreciate the irony of the fact that we're doing a workshop about publications and I'm speaking English. Sorry. Next, please. Some possible suggestions. So, the Animal Behaviour Collective microgrants was set up 2 years ago, and it's basically open access funding for small amounts of money. You can find them on definitely Twitter, possibly Instagram. And it's open to anyone from any country to apply for small money for, I think, pretty much anything. So that is certainly worth looking at. I wonder about preparing a report from this, and if there are other workshops in other countries, to share with publishers and journal editors to really highlight to them what some of the issues are and get them to try and help. Reach out to funders. If you're receiving a grant, then make sure they know that if they want that information published, within that grant they have to include some money so that you can pay for the publication to be open access, so you don't have to try and find the money from somewhere else. Again, with the journal editors, request and promote more translated content, perhaps as a minimum. Every journal, every article published in English has an abstract of the language of the country from where the work was done. So if you did your work in Thailand and you published in an English journal, the abstract would be in Thai or Bahasa Indonesia. And as I said, I hope if you are happy with this, perhaps we can hold more workshops in other countries based on this, to help share the problems, but hopefully share the solutions and find solutions together. Next, please. So that's it from me. I know I have more time, but I thought it would be better to have more time for ideas and questions. And I just again would like to thank and of course the Article Foundation who have supported this. I hope that the next few days will be good, useful, productive, good maybe for networking, meeting new friends. And so I think with that perhaps we could go to questions. So terima kasih banyak, mohon maaf bahasa Inggris. So I can explain myself a bit better in English sometimes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan, for your explanation and for sharing some insight over here. Okay, sedikit summary dari tadi apa yang Susan bicarakan. Memang penting banget untuk membangun komunitas primatologi, khususnya yang lebih inklusif. Harapannya ini salah satu jalan kita untuk mencapai ke arah sana. Itu dia kenapa kita lebih senang kalau misalkan teman-teman dari S1 sudah punya pengetahuan nih, gimana sih sebenarnya cara publish yang benar itu seperti apa. Karena saya sendiri pengalaman waktu pas dulu S1 juga saya nggak punya pengalaman itu gitu. Nggak banyak dosen yang sharing tentang mana sih tekniknya untuk masukin ke jurnal, step-step di awal dari mulai kita masukin, kemudian menerima review itu seperti apa, sampai akhirnya bisa publikasi itu berapa lama, kadang-kala nggak dijelaskan. Itu dia yang kita harapkan bisa kita dapat informasinya dari sini. Terus kemudian tadi Susan juga mention tentang IPS. Buat teman-teman yang belum tahu, setiap every 2 years? Jadi International Primatological Society dia punya kongres yang dilaksanakan setiap 2 tahun sekali. Itu salah satu hajatan paling besar di dunia primatologi. Yes, in Kuching, right. Dan kita bakal punya satu kongres yang deket banget, lokasinya di Malaysia, di Kuching, itu tahun 2023, tahun depan. Harapannya teman-teman bisa ikutan, bisa sharing apa yang sebenarnya teman-teman dapatkan dari hasil penelitian teman-teman yang saya rasa ini berkualitas sekali atau paling nggak penting banget untuk konservasi di negara kita sendiri. Seperti itu. Terus kemudian co-author itu yang paling penting karena biasanya suka ada free rider authornya minta untuk dimasukkan namanya sebagai co-author, tapi sebenarnya dia nggak membantu banyak. Ini juga teman-teman harus punya kemampuan untuk paling nggak berkontribusi di dalam paper itu sendiri, kayak gitu. Kita punya waktu untuk sesi tanya jawab. Saya harap teman-teman bisa lebih interaktif lagi, atau kalau punya pertanyaan apapun itu bisa kita diskusikan, bisa dalam bahasa Indonesia maupun bahasa Inggris. Oke. Yes, I will. Ya, oke. Teman-teman kalau ada pertanyaan boleh silahkan.
Halo Susan, perkenalkan saya Novita from Copenhagen Zoo Indonesia program. I want to ask you about how to decide the first author when it comes to the collector of data and the writer. So it's kind of different person. So which one to be the first author, the collector of data, or the writer? Thank you.